Hi, welcome to the Pursuit of Truth. So there's three things that I wanted to bring to you today that I watched on Sky News, actually almost one after the other. Examples of the failure of the system, of the things that we already all know, but we just keep getting many examples and nothing seems to change, and we expect change. What was it? Was it Albert Einstein that said madness is when you expect something different but with the same results, or I can't remember what it was now. It's something like that, isn't it? Where, if you keep doing the same thing and, you're expecting there to be a difference, but there isn't going to be if you keep doing the same thing. Yeah, that's what we're all doing. We're all allowing these things to happen. And this is just, this is just in the UK and just, 1 week that, 1 day events. There's many of these that are going on all over the place, all over our history, all over the world, every day, even in our everyday lives, that we're all accepting. I don't know when it's going to be enough. Anyway, so the first one is about... can I remember what the first one was about? Oh yeah, the first one is about Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson, and the BBC chairman, and a loan that Boris Johnson got from the BBC chairman after giving him a job. And it just, obviously Boris Johnson has said that, this is perfectly okay, and I'm sure on paper there's nothing, it's not like there's been a crime committed, it's not illegal per se, but it just is part of the proof that when, you hear people, truthers or woke people or whatever, talking about, what other people call conspiracies because they don't want to believe it, and once you put that label on it, then everyone can just say, oh wow, that's not true. The idea of the big boys network, the powerful people, their little small world of these rich or the elite or the 1%, whatever label you want to give them, examples of this, how it's working, and which occasionally the media gives us insight into. If someone tells you on the street, you're probably just going to laugh at them and say, "Oh, they're, ha 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 ha." Well, this is really important because it just goes to show you why things aren't getting changed. Because people are just keeping within that same circle. I'll keep you rich because you're rich. I'll help you out, but I won't help out the person on the street who's starving or in a country where they're dying. I know I'm using hyperbole in this argument, but yeah, so that's the first one. The second one, I'll talk about it when the second one. Let's hear this first one now, which was quite interesting. And, they even laugh about it themselves, the presenters, because it seems so obvious that this is scandalous, and yet nothing will get done in this and no one will care about it.
Take action to
And we've not heard from Mr. Zahawi today. Sources close to him have told us that he's definitely not going to resign. We'll see whether that's in his hands or not. But he did make a statement over the weekend.
Yes, he did. So in that statement, he said, following discussions with HMRC, they agreed that my father was entitled to founder shares in YouGov, the company, of course, that he founded more than 20 years ago. Although they disagreed about the exact allocation, they concluded that this was a careless and not deliberate error. Additionally, HMRC agreed with my accountants that I've never set up an offshore structure, including Bolshoi Investments, and that I'm not the beneficiary of Bolshoi Investments. Now, it's interesting there, I think the word careless there, I think we might take it to mean one thing, but actually what we have been hearing this morning is that it is a technical term.
Just a minute, I forgot, this is about Nadeem Zahawi. I didn't know he set up YouGov. YouGov that's always used by, media outlets to suggest all these things, and yet it's been set up by a member of parliament, or before he was a member of parliament, but that just muddies the water with their results. But anyway, so this is, I think the second story is about Nadeem Zahawi. There seems to be a lot of scandalous claims at the moment. This one is about him and some tax that possibly he didn't pay off. That it gets a bit murkier later on in the story, that we find out this may have happened when he was in charge of the tax office, and whether the agreement that was whether he had part to do with the agreement. It all looks very bad. Nothing changes. Everyone was moaning about Boris Johnson, but now the same thing's happening under Rishi Sunak. This is the thing that I was saying yesterday. It's not per se about the people. Yeah, it makes a difference if you have a good person, but the problem is good people go bad, like Tony Blair, etc. It's the system. The system is not workable in today's society. It's not workable for humanity in general. Anyway, hear a bit of this, and then you'll hear about the BBC chairman and Boris later.
Which does mean that he has paid a penalty about that. It is a technical terms in terms of not doing your due diligence right in terms of your tax affairs there. But he's confident that that is an explanation that closes the matter down, I suppose. The question really will be how many of his colleagues agree that that is the end of the matter now. Someone like Ian Duncan-Smith, for example, yesterday saying that there does need to be a bit more clarity on this. It's particularly bad optics for Rishi Sunak, given that he came to power himself not very long ago, of course, promising a government of professionalism, accountability, integrity. He's obviously had questions to deal with himself in the past over his wife's, Mr. Sunak's wife's non-dom status and tax affairs. It's already an attack line for Labour. This obviously, as we've been hearing this morning from Labour, just gives them more ammunition on this topic. And of course, it's not the only scandal that government find themselves mired in this weekend. So there have been reports about Richard Sharp, who is now the chair of the BBC, being accused of helping to arrange a loan guarantee of up to £800,000 for Boris Johnson when he was Prime Minister and struggling with his own finances, and that this was done just weeks before Mr. Sharp was recommended by Boris Johnson to become chair of the BBC, which carries with it a salary of £160,000. Now, Mr. Sharp denies there's any conflict of interest, said he just connected people. Boris Johnson, his people say, well, this is rubbish, and the Cabinet Office say everything was done appropriately. And clearly this was before Rishi Sunak himself was Prime Minister, but he's connected too because Richard Sharp was his old boss when they both worked at Goldman Sachs. And I think, as we were hearing from Jonathan Reynolds, this is a sense that Labour certainly arguing that this kind of gives a sense of, it brings down the whole political establishment when you have stories about sleaze, about scandal. Even if there is an explanation, I think this general sense of unease about the rules being not full politicians and being above the rules is something that really brings down the reputation of all politicians, and particularly for Mr. Sunak. It's difficult. Last week he just got fined for not wearing a seatbelt in a car. He's hoping to have a bit of a reset this week, talk about the NHS, and here he is with these two big scandals on his hands.
So just to clarify, I think I'm right in saying Richard Sharp, who used to be Rishi Sunak's boss when he worked at Goldman Sachs, is now the chairman of the BBC, but he's also a dinner companion of Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson decided that he was the only candidate that was fit to be the chairman of the BBC when he was the Prime Minister.
Yes, I mean, that's a neat summary of that, I would say. And, he did go through a process. There was a committee of MPs who questioned him about his suitability for the role. He argued that his experienced personality meant he was well suited for it. The Cabinet Office say, the right process was followed. But fundamentally, indeed, he was the candidate that Boris Johnson recommended for the role. And obviously, he's a well-known Tory donor. Clearly, it shows what a small world there is operating, I think, at the top of politics.
Eloquently put. Good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Thousands of paramedics.
All right, that's the next scandal. There's another story.
Equivalent, consistent.
Hello, this is Sky News Today. It's 11 o'clock. These are our headlines. Breaking news, Rishi Sunak asks his independent ethics advisor to look into the Nadim Zahawi tax case, saying there are questions that need answering. Also breaking this hour, the BBC chairman asks for a review into his appointment after claims he helped Boris Johnson get an £800,000 loan. Mr. Johnson has dismissed the claims.
This is a load of complete nonsense, absolute nonsense. Let me just tell you, Richard Sharp is a good and a wise man, but he knows absolutely nothing about my personal finances.
a first for hundreds of thousands of households as they're paid to use less electricity while coal plants are warmed up to deal with the cold snap. Thousands of ambulance workers stage more strikes as union bosses vow to continue until the government puts an offer on the table. And the search for a motive as police in California investigate the deaths of 10 people at the hands of a 72-year-old gunman. Hello, good morning. Breaking news, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has asked his independent ethics advisor to look into the Nadim Zahawi tax case, saying that there are questions that need answering. The Conservative Party chairman is under increasing pressure after it emerged that he settled a tax dispute while he was Chancellor. A source close to Nadim Zahawi has told Sky News that he's absolutely not going to resign. On Saturday, Mr Zahawi said that he paid the HMRC a sum linked to what he called a careless error. Well, our political correspondent Amanda Akas joins me now from Westminster. The fact that the Prime Minister has now ordered an investigation into this suggests he's taking it quite seriously.
Yes, absolutely. I think the stakes have just risen considerably for Nadim Zahawi because this morning what we've been reporting is he is absolutely not planning on resigning. That's according to sources close to him. We've been waiting to hear what the Prime Minister thinks about this, and now we have an answer. Mr Sunak says he is referring this to his independent ethics advisor, Sir Laurie Magnus, only appointed just before Christmas, of course, after quite a long vacancy without someone in that position looking into the case. Now, of course, we don't know what the findings of that investigation might be, and certainly in the past, independent ethics advisors' conclusions have been entirely ignored by the Prime Minister, as indeed had happened in the case of the allegations surrounding bullying and Priti Patel. But I think it really is quite a sign that Rishi Sunak is listening to the concerns of many across Westminster who are arguing that Mr Zahawi's position is untenable because so many questions still remain outstanding, although he himself argues that it was a careless, not a deliberate mistake, that a settlement has been reached with HMRC, which does, we understand, include some kind of penalty. We don't know how much that bill is in total. It's reported it could be around £4.8 million, but that's one question. Another question is exactly what happened in terms of the timing. We know that the deal was reached during his short period as Chancellor, when he was in fact actually in charge of HMRC, in charge of the taxman who was he was coming to this agreement with. There are questions around the transparency of that, questions around what the government knew, and questions around the various statements he has made as these allegations have come to light slowly over the past few months. Now, Mr Sunak clearly is the person who needs to signal his intent over this. We know that when he came into power as Prime Minister, he promised a government of professionalism, integrity and accountability. Labour have been arguing that every hour that goes by in which he doesn't sack Mr Zahawi, it shows how weak he is as Prime Minister. But clearly he's decided to buy some time. But I think certainly for Mr Zahawi and his supporters, it doesn't look like a particularly strong vote of confidence.
Amanda, we're just getting that statement. We're going to be able to bring you a clip of the Prime Minister in a short moment. But in the meantime, we've got the words of what the Prime Minister said. He said, integrity and accountability is really important to me, including in this case. There are questions that need answering, and that's why I've asked our independent advisor to get to the bottom of everything, to investigate the matter fully and establish all the facts and provide advice to me on Nadim Zahawi's compliance with the ministerial code. And then he goes on to say that I'm pleased Nadim Zahawi has agreed that approach and has agreed to fully cooperate with that investigation. So, Amanda, clearly the Prime Minister has concerns, but pointing out there that Nadim Zahawi agreeing that this is the right thing to do.
I think at this point, there wasn't much option, really. Clearly, this is a story which has been running and running. The questions haven't been going away. The other opposition parties demanding that his position is untenable, demanding his resignation. Of course, Mr. Zahawi has argued that that everything has been explained. It's above board, and he believes that he's behaved appropriately throughout.
And that's what they always say, isn't it? They always say that. Same as criminals. They're always innocent. I didn't do it, governor. It weren't me. You got the wrong mate. Unfortunately, if only we lived in a world where human beings couldn't lie and deceive. I mean, we could live in that world. I don't know if it's intrinsic or whether we learn this habit of lying. But that's the problem, because we can't take people at face value, because we know that human beings can lie. And, people, even like murderers and things, we've seen these stories where someone will murder someone, then they come up in front of the cameras and cry and, say all these things. Then it turns out they actually did the murder. The possibilities of humanity's deception is I won't say marvelous, but it's outstanding in the amount that we can lie and look very convincing. And so that's the worry. But what I'm trying to get to, it doesn't really matter to me. These things are just examples of power and money and corruption. It's happened since time immemorial. There are many cases of power and money and corruption. Good men turning bad. Because this is what happens, This is what money does, and the big boys network and the elite and all this kind of stuff. Having this kind of system, having this kind of societal way is always going to have this issue. That's why we need to get rid of money, because money is not helping humanity. These kinds of things are not helping humanity. They're wasting time again. Wasting time, these people who only care about their career and about obtaining money, and all this kind of stuff. That's all they're concerned about. They're not concerned about humanity's suffering. If there were people in power that were concerned about humanity's suffering, even in their own little sphere of the bit of land that has been obtained by men and given a name and given dominion, even if that little sphere, they cared about humanity's suffering, don't you think they'd be saying the things that I've been saying, or many people have been saying throughout time? No, they don't. They don't talk about these things. They don't talk about humanity's suffering. They're in power and they could do something about it, but never is anything done. Why? Ask yourself, why? Why are we living in the same kinds of humanitarian suffering that we have been for thousands of years? Why haven't we eradicated poverty? Why haven't we, made this, the place that we found ourselves upon, level for everyone? In the 21st century, there's talking about levelling up in like the north of England to the south of England, let alone the whole planet. Is never going to happen. There's always going to be the rich and the poor. That's the way the system is designed. That's the way that those people in power want to keep it that way. They want to hold on to their power. They don't want everyone to be equal. They don't want everyone to have the same lifestyle. Because if they did, why wouldn't it be happening? What's so difficult to make it happen? We can print money when the banks need it. We can print money when we need to find a cure to keep the rich and all of us alive. And anyway, remember, all of this is man-made. The whole way that we live is from thousands of years ago, from men who designed this system. We have no God that tells us, you must live like this. We are not slaves to any creature or anything other than ourselves. We design the monopoly board that we play our lives upon. Oh, that was nice, isn't it? Anyway, that was another example of power, greed and corruption. Take care, take it easy, God bless, and peace.